future.
There are no people.
There are no people in the future.
No people at all.
There are no people in the future.
Where did all my people go?
There are no people in the future.
Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. It is Friday, February 16th, 2024. Yes, a special Friday edition of Out to Coop Live. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyards and across the country. You can also join us at the end of the week, usually on Fridays, for our Friday Politics Roundup, where we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And you can support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress for all the details. And you can also help out the show right now. Get on over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And if you're one of our awesome podcast listeners, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen on. And leave a comment to let other folks know why you like the show. Little things like this help other people find the show. For more PA progressive talk and really national labor talk, head on over to the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe to his podcast wherever you get your podcast. Go to thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And if you haven't checked out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast, I don't know what you're waiting for. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house, and they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter or X, and subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, on iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. And The Signal is that podcast for the Bucks County Beacon. You know it well. The Signal is hosted by Beacon's editor-in-chief, Cyril Michaleko, and produced by yours truly. Twice a month, The Signal will shine a light on right-wing extremist currents streaming through Bucks County and beyond. Cyril invites guests who can provide insight, analysis, and organizing solutions so that we can steer the community toward calmer, saner, progressive roots. And in case you missed it, The Beacon has also launched its Gen Z podcast called The Civic Circle. Civic Circle, it tackles politics and policy from a Gen Z lens. Sarah Zhang, Mallory Marson, and Alexandra Coffey are students from Bucks County, PA. Once a month, they chat about activism and advocacy and all the political happenings affect their generation today. So check out The Signal at buckscountybeacon.podbean.com and The Civic Circle at civiccircle.podbean.com. For all you gamers out there, the Game Inn is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. Friends of the show, and they've got everything for retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops. And kids get discounts with every on the report card. How can you beat that? Check them out on their Facebook page. Follow them on Twitter at The Game Inn. That's 2 N's. If you've got a question about a game, something hard to get, shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. And a shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. You can check out all his stuff on his YouTube page or follow him on Twitter at SongAdayMan. Again, 2 N's, at SongAdayMan on Twitter. And we got some great stuff coming up and Out to Coop Live. Stay tuned for this coming Monday show. We're still working out some details. I'll let you know about that. But on Monday, February 26th at 7 p.m., we have Steve Oros and his lawyer, Lori McKinley. We'll be talking about his victory in U.S. federal court against Kutztown University after the university's administration refused to grant Oros disability accommodations following his recent heart transplant. Oros was faced with being forced back into in-person classes while COVID was still rampant or losing his job. He fought back instead and won. More details on that. It's a great story. Can't wait to be talking about that. And from what I understand, there's some implications that this case may be included in a Supreme Court case that has to do with the American Disabilities Act. So please tune in for that one. Oh, but that's not why you're here today, is it, folks? No, today's episode, I welcome back to the show Kathryn Joyce. We'll be talking about her recent article in Vanity Fair and the Hechinger Report about how the far right took over Pennsylvania School Board and how parents took it back. Yes, we're talking about the Pennridge School Board and the unexpected and game-changing victory by the Pennridge Community Alliance candidates this past fall that flipped 5 open seats on the board to take back control to bring the saneness back into our community school board. Kathryn Joyce is an investigative editor at In These Times, a freelance investigative reporter, and the author of 2 books, The Child Catchers, Rescue, Trafficking, and the New Gospel of Adoption, and Quiverfull, Inside the Christian Patriarchy Movement, which I cannot recommend strongly enough. Kathryn was formerly a reporter with Type Investigations and Salon, a contributing editor at The New Republic, and a contributing writer at Highline. Her work has also appeared in numerous publications, including Mother Jones, The Marshall Project, Longreads, The New York Times Magazine, Vox, The American Prospect, The Intercept, The Nation, Cosmopolitan, Adirondack Life, The Atlantic, Miss, the Harvard Divinity Bulletin, and many more. Yes, indeed. She is formerly the editor of Political Research Associates Quarterly Magazine, The Public Eye, and teaches an adjunct lecturer at Brooklyn College's Political Science Department. Welcome to the show, Kathryn.
Oh my goodness, that was a mouthful.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
You didn't need to read all that.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I mean, you're somebody's. I said this when you were on the show last time. You're somebody's work I've followed for quite some time through kind of various iterations in different places, especially as someone who's been tracking what's been happening on the far right for quite a while, even when it wasn't right on the front pages of our newspapers, long before Trump, long before we get this kind of like recent turn. And to see, you still doing this work is incredible. And the fact, and I think I said this to you off the air, but, this is the article on what happened at Pennridge that I've been hoping to see in print for a long time. And it only makes sense that it turns out you're the one that's going to be, I'm doing it, given that it's been right in the, in your work. So welcome to the show, Kathryn.
It's great to be back. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so before we get into the article per se, could you just talk a little bit about your work as an investigative editor In These Times? I mean, I love In These Times. I got right here, just so everybody knows, the latest kind of print edition is right out here. It's phenomenal articles on the immigration debate, the humanity of the inhumanity of the 2024 immigration debate. It's just a phenomenal article. I've already handed it off to some of my students who are doing work on this. Can you just talk about a little about the work that you do there within These Times?
Oh, it's so great to see that cover. Yeah, that is my colleague Nadi's amazing roundtable on immigration, which was so good. Yeah, I've been In These Times for a bit over a year now. I joined in late 2022, I guess. And yeah, I'm an investigative editor, so I work on a lot of our long form investigations. We have looked at a wide range of things in those pieces. We have looked at, in a series by another of my colleagues, Joseph Bullington, we looked at kind of rural gentrification, the way in the Mountain West, in places like kind of the resort areas of Montana, there has been such an influx of outside wealth and second home buyers, and tourists, and kind of the transformation of housing into Airbnbs, that the people who have lived there for a long time and the people who make those towns run have just gotten pushed out. And, we were talking just before the show about both being from upstate New York, and I mean, in a smaller fashion, I think that's something that we're both probably familiar with as well. We've looked at the impact of the Dobbs decision on, we published one of the first stories in the country on a woman who was forced to give birth after being denied an abortion thanks to the Dobbs decision by Bryce Covert. We had a fantastic investigation by Andrei Popoviciu, a Romanian reporter who transplanted to Senegal to look at the way that the EU is sort of outsourcing its border enforcement to, the border checkpoints of sovereign African nations, where now EU-funded surveillance technology, some of which is quite intrusive, and also really EU-focused policies are really impacting the way people live there. We had another piece from Adam Fetterman in the fall
Yeah.
about how there's this kind of land rush going on for the Arctic, focusing on Greenland, and how there's this kind of these twin pressures of extensive mining going on in Greenland, or people trying to open new mines, and also just this increased militarization of the entire region as it becomes sort of once again like the hotspot for a new Cold War. So it's been really exciting to get to work on all of these different sorts of projects with these really stellar reporters. Um, we have some great pieces coming up soon that I hope your readers and listeners will look at too.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And look, I'll just put the plug in right now. I said it like, please do check out inthesetimes.com. I mean, I'm a subscriber. I've been a subscriber for a long, long time. I mean, it is one of the publications in this country that has kind of established itself and has been around for a long time. It's been established itself as a nonprofit newsroom that has done investigative work that you just don't get this reporting elsewhere. And it's just, I mean, it really is. It's like the first thing that I read. I look forward to the physical copy every month. I got it tagged under my mags bookmarked here. It's the first thing I read in the morning.
That's awesome.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. So let's just talk about this. Like, so first, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit here. I mean, obviously I live in the Pennridge School District, right? My kids go to the schools there. We've been living what's been happening to our school district here. And I know that a lot of our listeners are familiar with some of the school board wars. So I'm curious, kind of coming at it from your lens, right? Coming from someone who's not like in this community, being forced to fight these battles, but then writing about this and situating it within this broader thing. Can you talk about like that angle of things, what this looked like as you coming in, what got you to decide to report on this, what's happened here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I need to shout out to a local hero there in Bucks County, and within somebody who's been covering the district, I think more thoroughly than anyone else, which is Jenny Stevens at the Bucks
100%.
County Beacon, who reached out to me in I think May. To let me know, this has been going on. I've been covering it. We think that it needs broader attention than just locally, even though I think Jenny's work was being read at a pretty national level, because I think a lot of people were paying attention to this. But before that, I had been paying attention to related things for a while. Last spring, I was working on the previous story that I had done with Hechinger Report and Vanity Fair, profiling what was going on in the school district in Sarasota, Florida, which I'm sure lots of people in Pennridge will
Indeed.
remember was, kind of take one for Vermilion Education to try to, get a contract with the school board there and, do some of presumably the same things that they did end up doing, that Jordan Adams did end up doing in Pennridge instead. So I was still kind of finishing my piece about Sarasota when the Vermilion contract there failed, and then very, very shortly thereafter, there was the announcement that it had been picked up in Pennridge instead. And so that was, really interesting, piqued my interest already. Bridget Ziegler, somebody I'd focused on a lot in my piece. Again, I keep saying, as everybody like there knows, but she posted on social media, it should have been us. Basically, it should not have been Pennridge. This should have been in Sarasota. We should have been leading on what she called an anti-woke audit, which I think, says something about the stature that this completely upstart new country had gained in, just basically weeks of its founding, that there were these different right-wing controlled school boards that were vying sort of to be the first to hire them.
Yeah, I mean that was. I mean, and Bridget Ziegler too, as well. One of the co-founders of Moms for Liberty, kind of down there,
Yes.
really, really pissed off that she was not, that Vermilion was not in their back, and you could see it like rolling out in Florida. I mean, they had like the carpet was already prepared. Jordan Adams had been consulting with Ron DeSantis already about some of the higher education policies and kind of like
Yep.
scrubbing the curriculum of DEI initiatives and things like this. And that was just a huge defeat that you had some Republicans on that board basically, turn against that proposal. And then it landed right here in our lap.
Yep. Yeah, no, it was, sort of like Pennsylvania is charging ahead where Florida couldn't get this to work. That was interesting. For sure.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And this is like, this is this little bit beyond what we're talking about, but there's very long interesting history between Pennsylvania lawmakers and Florida lawmakers. The last three chancellors of chancellors of the state system of higher education before the current guy were from Florida. They came out of the Florida system. They were connected with the Bush family. They were connected with education reform down there, and they kind of ship them up here. It's just and it's remarkable to see this kind of parallel continue at the K through 12 level, especially at the school board wars.
The Florida model.
The
Yeah,
Florida model.
absolutely. Wow.
Yeah, so I'm curious, as you were kind of, were there things that stood out for you as you were talking to folks? I mean, I love the fact that, you begin your article quoting Bob Costin, I always get his name wrong. Just lost your piece. Here we go. Bob Cosinow, right? He's a social studies teacher at Pennridge High School, and basically saying, look, what happens here is going to be the case study, right? This is how you take over the board, or this is how you win. I mean, I thought that was a great frame for the piece.
Yep.
And so can you talk a little about some of the conversations that you had with folks in the community about how they saw this fight and how they turned the tides, really?
Yeah, I mean, that was extremely interesting for me, especially coming right off of reporting in Sarasota, because there I was hearing sort of similar sentiments. A number of people there kept kind of echoing some variation on their sense that, we are this, underground laboratory for whatever Florida is going to unveil on a statewide level, and perhaps, broader than that, perhaps nationally, that Sarasota is this testing ground. Um, and I had heard that kind of so consistently from so many people I was speaking to in Sarasota that it really struck me in talking to people in Pennridge, that they were seeing the same thing. That I kept hearing that over and over again with different people that I spoke to in the community. A lot of whom are represented in the article, and a lot of others who spoke to me, on background or early on, and whose just time and insights really informed my understanding of what was going on. But again and again saying, we feel like there is an experiment going on. It feels like they are experimenting on my children. It feels like, Hillsdale College is, using us as this test case to make Pennridge kind of the first public school district that is being run along these lines, which Hillsdale College would disavow and say they have nothing to do
Right,
with
of
Vermilion
course.
education, of course. But yeah, I kept hearing that, and it because I kept hearing that, it really kind of stuck out to me when I spoke with Bob Cousineau in June, and his perspective was similar, but kind of with a bit of a tweak, saying, yes, it does feel like an experimental ground. It does feel like a case study, but it's unclear like what direction this case study is going to go in. We can be, the case study, kind of the testing grounds for how you can take over a school district and completely undermine it from within, or we can become this blueprint for how you fight back. And I don't think that's my, that didn't strike just me. I mean, I think in a lot of the other coverage of what happened in Pennridge, I saw kind of similar language again and again, people talking about a playbook, a playbook, a playbook, and, largely talking about like, this is the rights playbook, for taking over. This is the Moms for Liberty playbook. But the idea that Pennridge could also be a playbook for fighting back, for figuring out like what mix of advocacy and you know lawsuits or complaints or other tactics could combine, obviously with a really significant electoral outcome, to really turn the tide on this. And that was, yeah, that was something I thought about, throughout kind of the months where I was working on this off and on.
Yeah, and it's really, and all credit goes really to the parents and the organizations who helped build that narrative about this being a playbook too. All thanks goes to Jenny Stevens, who helped kind of, get the shout out and show like the background and the context, which was lacking from most other local reporting. I mean, local reporting in some of the kind of more mainstream newspapers, it'd be like, oh, this happened and this happened. Okay, that's great. But why did it happen, right? How is this connected? What is the information? What's the background that's going to help us understand what is actually happening here at Pennridge? And, like you mentioned Laura Foster, one of the co-founders of the Ridge Network, who was, and Adrian King, who basically helped kind of build those networks. And there were, and people doing the door knocking, going door to door, talking not just about elect this candidate, but helping spread that kind of education about what is actually happening here at Pennridge and why it's important both for our kids, for this district, and then beyond.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, one of the things that you mentioned this in the article, connecting up, of course, the losses of Moms for Liberty back candidates that happened kind of across the country. I mean, Iowa was a big story for a while, but several school districts that had Moms for Liberty back candidates across the country also lost at the same time. And personally, I began getting a little bit concerned about a narrative of victory, right? A narrative of like, okay, we finally put Moms for Liberty to rest. Because even like right in this area, we have a school district right down the road. It's in Souderton School District, that went the other way, right? That was just getting off the ground in terms of the extremism that we saw in Pennridge. We saw the Kutztown area school district, which is, I teach at Kutztown University. This is kind of in the public school district out there. Same thing happened there. And so we see district after district that are, less, let's say, high profile at this point, but are nonetheless going to or are experiencing some of the similar things we have. And I know that folks from the Ridge Network have already begun reaching out to some of these other school districts, and those school districts have been reaching out to folks in Pennridge about this. So, I mean, not asking you to kind of predict the future here or anything like this, but, given a sense of your kind of ongoing reporting, what you saw in Pennridge, what you saw in Sarasota, how influential do you think groups like this, like the Moms for Liberty folks, and these kind of extremist elements, the money going into school boards, you see that as a kind of tendency continuing going forward? My skepticism was always on the line of like, these folks don't go away. They've got tons of money behind them, and they're just refining a playbook. But I'm curious your perspective on, where this goes from here, especially we're in an election year. And so, I mean, I don't mean just in terms of the presidential election. I'm really more even thinking about how these folks are building out these right-wing networks.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, which is what people always say when they don't have a hugely satisfying answer. So, I mean, I read, I believe it was in the Daily Beast a week or two ago. You probably saw this, but there was a story that it had a title something like even Moms for Liberty is getting sick of Moms for Liberty, and it was talking about a local chapter that had gone from, I think, a couple hundred members to like 3, and then those 3 members like got together at a diner and they're like, yeah, okay, I guess we're done here. And they just kind of closed up the chapter and like posted an announcement like, this chapter is available if anybody would like to come in and get it. Yeah. I mean, and they talked a little bit about the waning appeal of some of the high intensity activism, now that fights over school opening or closures or masking requirements or vaccines is not foremost in the news. I mean, not to say that COVID is gone, but
Sure.
not, first and foremost in the news every day. That for a lot of people who got drawn in because of that, not all of them, had the same level of energy or interest in fighting so-called woke politics in school. Obviously, a lot of them did, because that's, where we've seen so much of the kind of ferocious energy that drove the situation in Pennridge, kind of leading up to this past year, because so many things were happening before Vermilion showed up, obviously, and also in Sarasota, where there was just this kind of similar sense of every school board meeting brings something new, brings like some new kind of radical proposal that is somehow tied to this narrative of, we've got to take back our schools. So, yeah, I mean, I think that was a really interesting article. And I don't know, in honesty, and I don't know if anybody really knows, like, is that the way things are going to proceed? Is, the sort of crop of scandals around Moms for Liberty leaders from, I think there was one in Pennsylvania who was disgraced fairly recently, and then obviously there's Bridget Ziegler herself,
Who's
had,
that's a whole other
yeah, no, we don't
can of
need to
worms
touch
there.
that, but like, I mean, like these scandals that either show the mask slipping and kind of like the real extreme nastiness that is driving some of these people, or just the rank hypocrisy of somebody like a Bridget Ziegler, going after LGBTQ youth and colleagues, on one hand, and then not living a purely kind of heteronormative life herself. But yeah, I don't know which of these things went out, and this is maybe like taking a step back to think about it. But sometimes I think it helps to think about what's happened with other right-wing movements. We don't talk about the alt-right anymore, and we haven't really talked about the alt-right so much for a few years, really, since Charlottesville. But it's not because those people went away. It's not because they saw the light and, stopped being hateful bigots. It's because they rebranded. Some of the leadership maybe was put out to pasture, but those energies were recaptured. They were redirected to new projects, whether that's kind of formations like the America First so-called Groypers, or other things. We are still absolutely dealing with a very radicalized, white nationalist right-wing movement that believes in many of the same things that the alt-right did, and in many regards, like those things have just become mainstream talking points for most of the right today. Most of the conservative movement, most Republicans now are giving voice to things that were extreme when we heard them from the alt-right in 2015, 2016. So I think there's one level on which if a brand gets tarnished, similar things pop up under new branding, and that's just the way it is. I mean, I don't think a lot of these fights get permanently won. And what we've heard from historians and other smart people over the last few years that Moms for Liberty has been organizing, and they grew into this behemoth so quickly, thanks largely to lots of money and institutional and infrastructure support that we weren't seeing, but also because the playbook for that, to use that phrase again, was already written decades ago. This is the same sort of stuff that we have seen historically. So I don't, I don't know exactly what the fortunes of that particular group are going to continue to be. does seem like they're a little bit tarnished right now. And it does seem, to some extent, like some of the people who really made their names, the Chris Rufos, have, at least temporarily, have shifted their attention to higher education. So we're definitely seeing a lot of stuff happen there. But my suspicion is, that there may be more rebranding than there would be, actual kind of anything like acknowledging defeat and walking away. Could be wrong, of course.
No, but I mean, I think that, I love the way that you frame that. I mean, because that feels right, like about what's happened, right? To looking at this kind of rebranding, and the brands that don't get tarnished. I mean, Moms for Liberty might be tarnished right now, but the brands that don't get tarnished are like the Scaife Foundation, the Bradley Foundation,
Sure.
the DeVos Foundation, the big money that can afford to just back off these folks and like let them like, oh, well, whatever, we're still in the shadows, right? So we're just going to quietly walk our money away, and let them kind of burn out and just wait for the next best thing. And it seems that the right is extraordinarily good at just throwing a bunch of crap against the wall and to find out what goes. Like I am, looking at what just happened with the Super Bowl and Taylor Swift, for example. Right. And then, which is just this like craziness, right? But now there's reporting out that's like 1 in 5 or something like this of people buy into the conspiracy theories behind Taylor Swift stuff. And then at the same time, a report comes out from Pew Research that's basically saying that more young white men, right, are finding feminism to be a problem, right, than ever before, right? I mean, not ever before, but I mean, in recent years, the tendency had always been that that's dropping off. People are kind of accepting the premise, and then so these things seem connected to like certain avenues of gaming culture and internet culture among young white boys, and all this stuff that's happening, and so like you were saying, the energy still is there. And they're just waiting for where's the money going to get dumped. And I got my money right now on something connected with Taylor Swift. It's going to make its way into meme culture to help generate more backlash. So
yeah. I mean, I'm glad that people are finding out that the Pentagon created her.
It's incredible. Back, it was a lab, like special kind of like cybernetic. It was crazy.
Yeah, they're like, she's got to know how to dance. I mean, I'm getting to be old enough where I've, having these kind of codgerly moments where I'm like, but this is just what they were doing 30 years ago. Yeah, I mean, like the first book that I wrote was about the so-called Quiverfull movement, these right-wing fundamentalist Christians. I'm not using that as a pejorative, just to distinguish them from more mainstream evangelicals, but people who basically believed in having as many children as they could, in part as a means of kind of winning the culture wars demographically. And a lot of things went along with that kind of complicated movement. But I've just been noticing in the last few months that, along with this increasing kind of narrative against feminism, and like all of this, like, I don't know, Bronze Age mindset, kind of eat raw eggs, kind of pro-masculinity movement.
Dude, right?
Yeah. Now there's just starting to be this TikTok generation, putting out these sort of gauzy videos about, how, they're going to have the last laugh because, they have decided to become a trad wife and have, 5 children, and, you secular feminists aren't doing that. And so we're going to win. And, as a side note, the young adults, I guess now in their 30s, who grew up in the first wave of that, see this stuff on social media and they laugh and laugh and laugh, because, by their own estimation, like 50% of them, turn out being queer in some way or another. Many of them, become atheists, which not, all of those are kind of value neutral things, but what I'm saying is a lot of them walk away from it. But it's just interesting to me, how much there is just kind of this regurgitation of the same ideas in new packaging, that are being updated for kind of a new generation of young right-wing activists. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent.
No, no, not at all. I mean, I think that's exactly what you just described there in my mind. This is the corporate mentality of marketing, essentially. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it mirrored with, what we get in the kind of most extreme kind of like, theocratic kind of like, authoritarian politics. I mean, it's essentially is what marketers do, right? And they say, okay, we know that, okay, these 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds are now bored with what we're doing here. So we're going to target the kids again, because we know that what we need to do is we need to make sure that those are going to be consumers that are going to buy our products in 10 years. And so, I mean, what I see happening on TikTok, I mean, I'm just sitting here nodding along to what you're saying. You can see these memes kind of repeat themselves, and being like, yep, they're just taking this stuff. And, I was thinking about there's all the resurgence of the 80s as like, a cool thing. I'm like, yeah, it's the same thing. It's you're taking this kind of like nostalgic kind of like retro thing, and then you're bringing it kind of introducing a new audience to it and expecting it to do the same kind of work. And it works for a bit. Except this is like, we're talking about, the future of this country. We're talking about violence being committed against communities of color and kind of LGBTQ communities here. So the stakes are so much higher, but it's the same process. I mean, it's like this runaway kind of billionaire class that are investing in marketing for the future they want against the one that we want.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah, no, it's wild.
Yeah, Emily just could chime in. She's, it's like Goldwater 6.0.
I like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned at the top of the show, I appreciate you so much coming on the show again, and I appreciate so much your reporting. It was wonderful. I have to say, the day that I woke up and looked at my social media, instead of it being a just complete, horror show, was filled with people sharing your article kind of around the community, and we're so thrilled to kind of see that kind of in print, and both as kind of a validation of the efforts, but also as kind of like, yes, like we had to go through this, so we are here to help. This kind of thing. It was really a nice moment in the midst of the battles that we've been facing.
That is really nice. Yeah, and I'm sure everybody there who's been really active has more stories, personally, but I got emails and heard from people, as far away as Colorado,
Wonderful.
Talking about how they were really glad to see this. They're going through something similar. It's really, good to see what other people have done, in addressing this sort of hostile takeover.
100%. Lots of accolades are coming in now about great article, awesome article. Thank you so much. So, in the chat right now. So that's fantastic. So, I mean, you mentioned at the top of the show a bunch of things that you're, say, working on a thing, but in addition to sending everybody over to inthesetimes.com, right, to make sure that, you're reading what's going on there, you're sharing the work that's going on there, become a subscriber. I mean, not only am I a subscriber, I'm a kind of like a supporter, of the means. I think the importance of independent media is just critical.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I mean, so please head on over there, everybody, and seriously support the work they're doing it in these times. But there's anything else that, say, you're working on or in the horizon that's coming up, either you kind of individually or in the magazine, that you'd want to kind of plug and tell folks to look out for?
Well, readers can't see it, but you can. This is a few issues back, but we put out a special issue.
That's a great art, yes.
About the right wing, and it was the first time in these times had ever kind of dedicated so much space and time and energy, to really grappling with the right and talking about, what it means for the real kind of movement left, and like the side of the left that traditionally has been really concerned, with issues like labor and workers' rights and so many others, but what it means for that left, to need to take the right and the threat of the far right, very seriously. So that special issue was our November issue. We put all the articles up from it are online already, but we are going to continue doing more reporting about the right, and I'm excited for that because obviously I think it's really important. But I think it's bringing this issue up from a slightly different perspective, and thinking through what does it mean to be grappling this, and where does this fit in to a left sensibility. So I'd recommend that, and yeah, I personally am going to be continuing to write about these issues there and perhaps elsewhere, and when I occasionally post on social media, it will often be to share those articles. I'm sort of a disappointing follow on social media, but I do put my articles there.
Well, your articles show up. That's what matters.
Yeah.
Disappointing follower. Yeah. Well, with the collapse of all these platforms and things right now, I've become a disappointed follower. So at some point, you to be out there on these things, it's like half the time it's like crap. But I'm so glad you brought up that issue of In These Times called "What Is to Be Done: The Spread of the Far Right." It is a phenomenal article. Kathryn has got a great article in there with Jeff Shartlett called "Losing the Plot." I was just talking to her before the show about this a little bit, which is seeing all these folks to the former left kind of turn to the right. How do we make sense of this? There's a great piece in there from Bill Fletcher Jr. on the fascist movement's biggest threat, labor unions. Fantastic. Just to give you everybody a sense of kind of what's in there. A great piece in here by Rick Perlstein. We're in an epidemic of right-wing terror. Won't somebody tell the press? Super article there. Queer Louisianans are fighting back book bans. Connected to that's a part of their dispatch. Just to give you a sense of some of the things that's in that article or in that issue, and that, like you said, a lot of that stuff is up online now. So it's great reading.
Yeah, thank you so much for reading, and thank you for being an In These Times supporter.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Kathryn, once again, thank you so much for your reporting and your work. I appreciate you coming on the show today, and keep up the fantastic work, and can't wait to see what's coming up next.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, great. And we'll be dreaming of the Adirondacks in snow for the rest of the day now. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. I want to remind you can help support this show by heading over to patreon.com/rcpress. You can become a supporter for as little as $5 a month. Look for all the great stuff coming forward, everybody. Talk to you soon. See ya!